And if you have ever dreamed of tackling an extreme physical feat, something that would challenge your mind, your body, and your will to make it to the finish line, then you will enjoy our guest on Good Things today. Joining us is Mr. Andy Armstrong. In 2000, him and his nephew rode across the country on a bike back in 2000 to meet interesting people and create wonderful memories. And he's joining us today. Hey, Andy.
How you doing, Rebecca? Good to be with you.
It's good to finally have you here because we have been chatting and talking about this day for a while. But, man, this all started kind of as an accident. I was sharing the Bob Barnes story here on Good Things. He's the New York cyclist who is trying to cycle to all 50 states. And he joined us here in Jackson a couple weeks or maybe months back. And you guys gave him a little good Mississippi hospitality. So let's start there. How did you get connected with Bob Barnes?
Well, I have my second son lives in Jacksonville, Florida, and he heard on Fox.com this interview with this person riding the bike. And since my son and I had ridden to Disney World and to Niagara Falls in '84 and '85. He just automatically said, "Well, Dad, you'd want to talk to this guy." And so I contacted Bob, and I was so excited because not many times have I been able to talk to somebody who's experienced the things that I've experienced. They don't understand about being on a bike day after day after day. And Bob and I really connected when he came here.
And he actually mentioned that Jackson, Mississippi, our capital here, was his favorite so far that he had visited. So I owe that to not only the good people of Mississippi, but you and your lovely wife who showed him great hospitality when he was coming through the state. You mentioned, though, there's very few of you out there, Mr. Andy, who know what it's like to travel from coast to coast or long distance on a cycle. So that takes us to your ride back in 2000. When did you sort of get this idea or have this dream of taking your bike cross country?
Okay. Well, it came from failure and it came from success. When I was a sophomore at the University of Mississippi, I was on a football scholarship down there playing. I thought, well, man, I was in good shape. I could ride. So I borrowed an old bicycle to ride from Hattiesburg to Meridian. 5 hours later in Laurel, my bicycle, I couldn't go anymore. And I had to admit the defeat. And that hurt. In '84, I rode to Disney World. In '85, rode to Niagara Falls, and I was successful. And what better thing to do with yourself is go from sea to shining sea.
On the seat of a bicycle, I could think of ways to see the shining sea other than a seat on the bicycle, or at least by getting there. I think the distance between here and Disney, Mr. Andy, we can all connect with because there's so many listening to Good Things who have driven that 12 hours in a car to see the famous mouse. Most of us wouldn't think about doing that on two wheels. It was a long trip on four in that way. But I love that. I love that you challenge yourself, and I love that for this particular trip, I guess it would be your longest one, you recruited a family member, your nephew. So how did you sucker him into the ride?
This is really way out. When I finished the Disney World trip in '84, he was standing at the finish line. He was a 3-year-old at the time. Little did we know that 16 years later that he would volunteer to go with me on this ride. My wife wouldn't let me go without somebody going with me. And so at Christmas down in Jacksonville, I threw it open to anybody in her family. Anybody want to go with me? Ashley raised his hand. He's a 19-year-old athlete going to college, and I'm a 57-year-old. The match didn't seem good, but it was wonderful.
And when did you guys kick off your coast-to-coast ride, Andy?
Repeat that, excuse me.
When did y'all set off? When did you start the trip?
We started it in early June or late May. It was from Fernandina Beach, Florida. And I knew myself that one turn of the pedal would determine I would get there. I mean, after a time we started, we would get there. We had a lot to learn at that first time because Ashley wanted to get there fast. I wanted to get there slow. We were basically the tortoise and the hare. And I figured out by the time we got to halfway through Georgia, I had convinced him that the trip was not getting there. We could get there. We're going 1 mile at a time. We could get there. But the trip was to meet people along the way. And I had more fun seeing him grow as a young man and being able to be outgoing and reach out to people and let people tell them their story.
And a story you guys both have, considering that you completed the trip. How many miles total was it from your start to your finish point, Mr. Andy?
About 2,500 miles, give or take some.
And how long did it take you in terms of weeks, months, years?
39 days. And that was stopping a couple of times at the Grand Canyon, at Hoover Dam, Las Vegas. And then I had a sick day.
So I'm curious in terms of preparation. From the moment that you and Ashley decided to go on this, cross-country 2,500-mile bike ride to the time you started, how much preparation time did you give yourself?
Probably about 2 months. But what I started doing is riding out. Started out easy, out 15 minutes, back 15 minutes. And I got up to where I could go 90 miles in a day. The one thing I didn't do was practice day after day after day. Ashley, I don't know how he got ready. I don't think he had to get ready. He was slim and trim and ready to go. I was fat and slappy.
Well, he was also 19 years old, and so that definitely played in his favor, Mr. Andy. And we need to note that this is in the year of 2000. So this was 22 years ago, before smartphones, before GPS TomToms, before being able to, easily connect. I know your loving wife of almost 60 years was probably worried sick over the 39 days for you. So how did you keep in touch with those back home?
I did have a flip phone that was, you had, didn't have service most places, and if you're out of your service area, it cost you extra lot. So I had to find a pay phone. You know what that is, Rebecca?
I've used one a time or two. I have. I've made collect calls, but it was way back in the day.
Right, collect calls. I call every night to Dottie. That was not only her wish, but my desire.
I can only imagine that now it would be so much easier just to send a selfie or to, send a quick text message. But it was that longing, too, I know, that just made it more memorable when you do get to check in and sort of hear from each other that I think we do miss in this instant messaging kind of day. But you talked about the people along the way, but also it's 2,500 miles. You had to have some kind of accidents along the way, not bad ones, but flat tires, broken spokes, that kind of thing. How did you and Ashley sort of navigate just life on a bike for 39 days?
Well, one big difference was Ashley had a bike with thin tires. I had a bike with thick tires. Ashley constantly had flat. I had basically none. We carried some parts with us. There was 2 or 3 times on the trip where our bikes had a broken spoke, and I didn't have any flat tires. He had about 5 or 6. But there were a few times where we were out in nowhere and had to find a bike shop and to go take our bike and fix it and then go back and start our trip again.
All in all, how did you financially plan for this trip? Because along the way, you have to eat. You don't have to get gas, but you may have to buy a tire. You have to sleep. Did you guys think that through in terms of an allowance, or how did you guys approach it financially?
Well, you guys didn't have much to say about it. My wife said that we would be staying in a hotel every night. She didn't want me out camping somewhere. So we did. It was difficult trying to end up the day in a place where there was a motel. Now, with Bob Barnes, he camps, so he can stop anywhere. But there were sometimes, like going into Flagstaff, Arizona, we were caught out after dark. We didn't even have lights on our bike, and we rode the last 2 hours in the dark on the interstate on Route 66, getting in there. So it was kind of scary.
There were no Airbnbs back in 2000, were there, Andy? Or, that sort of instant gratification that Bob's getting, but you still made the memorable connections with people. We want to dive into that and more with Andy Armstrong, who rode by bike from coast to coast back in 2000. We're learning that and more up next. More. We're finding out more about Andy Armstrong's adventure back in 2000, where him and his nephew Ashley rode across country, almost 2,500 miles in 39 days on a bicycle. And all for, I guess, the benefit of doing it. Andy, what was kind of the motivation behind it? Was it for a good cause? Was it just for, an experience of the lifetime? What kept you in the seat or in the saddle?
I'm basically an adventurer and traveled all over the world, and I just like to have new experience. This was a challenge that the challenge in it. I was done before a lot of folks. Meridian Star carried a story on us every day, front page, for 39 days. And so people back in Meridian were following. I knew that stopping was not an option. And so that was the driving force. And as I said, being able to be with Ashley and show him a part of America that he hadn't seen, and especially the part of America that most people don't see, and that's off the interstate in small towns, talking to real people about their life.
Which is part of the memories that you made, is just meeting everyday folks who thought these two kids, or one man and a kid, was crazy, coming through town on a bicycle, probably so. It's a great opener for a conversation starter, Andy. So who are some interesting people that you met along the way?
Well, I'll share one of the ones that's still a great part of my life now. Her name was Dorothy Lucas, and she worked at the Welcome Center at Lake Village, Arkansas. I had ridden across the Mississippi. It was really hot across Alabama, Mississippi, and the Mississippi Delta was especially tough because of the wind. And I had gotten dehydrated. I didn't know it at the time. That's what it was. I went into the welcome station, and Dorothy looked at me, and I didn't know her. She didn't know me. She looked at me, and she said, "You look like you need to go to the doctor." And I said, "Well, thanks." And anyway, she said, she made call, said, "Just a minute." She called and got me an appointment with a doctor. Took me there, made arrangements for us to get a motel because the doctor told her you're going to have to do tests the next day. I mean, just unbelievable welcome there, truly a welcome station. And so Dorothy and I have kept in touch every year, 2 or 3 times a year. She'll call or I'll call her.
That's wonderful, and good to have those angels along the way to make sure that you do take care of yourself physically. It'd be easy just to, brush it off as you being tired, but it could be something serious like dehydration or worse. Now, I saw one of the fancy photos is you actually got the chance to meet Jay Leno, you and Ashley. Were you guys actually on the show, or did you just get to say hi? How did that happen?
Okay, this is really good. I have a former student, Cindy Broder now. That lives in Hollywood. Her husband is a agent out there. And when she had told us that when we got to California, he wanted us to stay in their guest house. And so when we were there, we got there and there was a big basket of fruit waiting for us. There was also a letter. She was gone out of town, but there was a letter saying there'll be a limo to pick you up and take you to the Jay Leno show tomorrow night. And so the limo came, picked us up, took us to the Leno show. They took us to the green room where all the guests were waiting to go on the show. We stayed there, and then we got some seats, beautiful seats, right next to the people connected with the show. And when Jay comes out before the show starts, and he calls people out of the audience, and he called us down on the stage, and we talked about our bike trip in front of the audience. It was not on TV, thank goodness, but we talked about our trip with him, and then he goes back. We have to have about 5 minutes. He goes back, and a comedian comes out to get everybody hyped up. He looks up and says, "Hey, I want one of a biker." My nephew jumped up. He was so excited. And he said, "No, I want the old." And so I went down there, and he had a bunch of girls down there dancing in the dance contest. So they put them around me, and said, "Start dancing, boy." And anyway, I made a fool of myself. But it was a great experience.
I'm impressed you still had the flexibility to dance after riding a bicycle all that way and all that time. Your legs be sore, so it does sound like a trip of a lifetime. We've had someone ask, though, Andy, what kind of bike did you and Ashley ride on? I know you mentioned you had 2 different kind of tires. You each had a different set of type of tires. You each obviously had a different set. What type of bikes did you use for your trip?
I had a crossbreed between a road bike and a mountain bike, and it needed to be heavy. Ashley was using having a light duty bike. I can't remember the name of it, but with the weight on it, he had a lot of problems. But on the next trip I took, I bought a bike like that for my grandson, the same bike like I had in Europe. But it was not an expensive bike. It was not an expensive bike.
We also were asked, Andy, did you guys bike your way home, or did you take a flight back to Mississippi? Or once you reached the Pacific Ocean, how did you make your way back home?
I'm just crazy. I'm just half crazy, not full crazy. We had a reservation on a flight coming back home, back to Jacksonville, and brought our bikes back. And it was that was when we reached California. That was the end of the thing. That was the carrot. That's one of the reasons we went east to west, because we wanted to have the carrot of California to draw us there. And it was really an emotional experience when we got there at the end.
I can only imagine, and getting to put your feet in the sand and see the water and the waves, and just knowing that you put your mind to something and you completed it. Speaking of the bikes, though, you have them, or they are up as a form of art now. You didn't just put it in a closet or hang it out to dry or in a garage sale. How did it get transformed into something more memorable?
Well, I did just have it sitting out beside my shop, and one day it was stolen. I went on the internet and I went on Facebook and pleaded for it to come back home, and it made its way back home. And so I said, well, this is too precious to just let rust and go away. So my wife, who was an artist, took beads and beaded it up. It looks like a Mardi Gras bike now, and beaded it up, and we have it on the wall and with plaques on it indicating where that bike has been. And so it's now personal. It went from a practical means of transportation to a work of art.
Do you still bike ride now, Mr. Andy?
A broken leg, a broken pelvis, and a broken tibial plateau fracture keeps my knee from working right. I had one more trip planned, and that was to go to New Zealand and ride the 2 islands of New Zealand, which I probably won't happen. But then again, it could. It's 78. You're
still young. You can still pedal a bike. You know what? Nobody would hate you, Mr. Andy, if you utilize one of those electric bikes now, which is part power, part, you do it and sort of give yourself a little boost. I think that would be a good medium once you reach 80.
That's cheating.
Why did I expect anything less to come out of your mouth about that, though? So what do you say to those who may have a dream or a vision, or just have the spirit to do something crazy like you and your nephew Ashley did, 22 years ago? I mean, about going for it. I mean, because I'm sure folks told you were nuts, but you went ahead and went with it. What do you say to those that are thinking about something fun?
I say don't wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow's never going to come. And also, don't say I can't. That's say, and don't say why not. You say why not. Hey, that dream is something that a lot of things will be taken from you, but that dream will stay with you forever and ever and ever as a memory. And so I have had more fun reliving this with people. I've done talks all over the Mississippi, and it's been fun reliving people. For some people who will never do it, for others. And they could live it vicariously through my stories. For those that can do it, maybe I could encourage them to show a Mississippi school teacher that weighed 251 pounds when he started, ended up at 215, can have a dream and make it come true, even though the odds seem to against.
Well, that is definitely a great way to end it. Last thing, Ashley, your nephew, did he ever ride a crazy distance again, or was one and done with his uncle enough for him?
No, he went from the Maine to Florida. He went he did about 4 or 5 trips. One with his wife, and I talked to him the other day, and he's got 3 young children, or he has 3 young children. He said, "I can't wait till they get older. We're going to go on a bike trip." So that's exciting for me.
That is definitely exciting. Well, you've got me wanting to pull out a bike and go for a ride. I've always said, Mr. Andy, that for my 40th birthday, I wanted to do an Ironman. I keep saying it until someone pressures me into seeing it to completion. But that little 100 and something miles is nothing compared to your 2,500. So you never know. I guess a dream is can still be alive. So I appreciate your time here on Good Things, and congratulations on all your adventures.
Well, thank you, and let me leave you with this: 1 mile at a time, and that's all it takes. 1 mile at a time.
1 mile at a time. And a special thanks to your son, Ken, who was listening to Good Things and made the connection several weeks back. We appreciate our listeners and you, Mr. Andy. And everybody stick with us. We got more for you coming up next.